Illinois' Assistant House Majority Leader Jay Hoffman joins us now on the record.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
It's good to have you with us. Congrats on your election win and the Workers' Rights Amendment passing.
And congratulations on you getting this high-powered job here in St. Louis.
Oh, I don't know about all that. Thanks.
Moving from Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah, Springfield. Now we're covering both sides of the river, Missouri and Illinois. And one of the things we're trying to learn from this midterm election is what is happening in Madison County with the politics. Labor came out big there. The Workers' Rights Amendment performed really well. Some Republicans picked up some seats there. Some Democrats held their ground. But they voted against Governor Pritzker for Darren Bailey. What is the makeup of Madison County politics?
Well, it certainly has changed over the last probably 4 to 6 years. We've seen the countywide offices go much more Republican. While we know Madison County and St. Clair County and the entire Metro East, as well as St. Louis, is very highly unionized in that they believe in collective bargaining. They believe in the right to band together to get better rights for workers, whether it's salary or pensions or health care. And I think that you saw that the Workers' Rights Constitutional Amendment, which is actually going to amend our Constitution to put in our Constitution in Illinois the right to collectively bargain, I think you saw that that's something that crosses political spectrum, whether it's a Democrat, Independent, or Republican.
Before the election, there was a big messaging battle over what the Workers' Rights Amendment would do. After the election and that victory of the collective bargaining power are going to be enshrined in the Constitution, there's likely to be a legal battle over what it actually means. For example, there are some critics, even those at the Illinois Policy Institute and others, who have pointed to floor testimony on the Senate from Senator Ram Villavalam, who said it would only apply to I believe he said to public sector workers, not to private sector union workers. So to union workers in the trades who see that and hear that, is there some victory for them in this Workers' Rights Amendment?
Well, I totally disagree with the Illinois Policy Institute's interpretation of the Constitutional Amendment. And in the House debate, I know it was very clear that we believe that this constitutional amendment should apply to all workers throughout Illinois. They should have the right to collectively bargain. And what I think the fear mongers have put out there is something that is totally not true. What it's going to do is really not change the way things are done in Illinois. It does put in the Constitution the right to collectively bargain. But what it does do is it says, like the Rauner administration and former Governor Rauner, he spent 2 years without having a state budget, all trying to take away the right to collectively bargain for workers in Illinois. He wanted to make Illinois a right to work state. So we didn't have a budget for 2 years because that was his mission. And we as Democrats said that we're not going to do that. So what happened during those 2 years? Seniors were losing many of their services. Meals on Wheels was losing funding. Mental health services were drastically reduced. And the list goes on because we didn't have a state budget, all because it was his intent to take away the right to bargain collectively for workers in Illinois. So this would say in our Constitution, a future governor can't do that.
Right, it's effectively a ban on those right-to-work policies or any craftily manufactured policy that looks like the local zones.
Right, and currently in Illinois, the right to collectively bargain, I believe, is already in our current law, but this puts it in the Constitution so that what Rauner tried to do, there would be no use for him attempting to do it because constitutionally he couldn't.
Elections are always interesting barometers of public opinion, and they often leave interesting breadcrumbs for politicians to build their platform and strategy moving forward. I don't know if either party was as popular as the Workers' Rights Amendment was. In fact, I think the data is pretty clear. The Workers' Rights Amendment polled much higher than every statewide Democrat in almost every corner of the state, a few small exceptions. What does that tell you about what direction the Democratic Party needs to go next?
Well, first of all, I've always thought that what we should do in Springfield, and I've tried to live my legislative life this way, is you work in a bipartisan fashion as much as possible. Some things just we're not going to agree on, but when it comes to working across the aisle, I think there's so many things that you can do to move Illinois forward. The Workers' Rights Amendment, I believe, shows clearly that Republicans and Democrats, as well as independents, believe that you should have the right to collectively bargain. Now, some consultants would tell you that these types of issues that are on the ballot, attaching them to specific candidates doesn't always work or doesn't matter. because you do have a D or an R by your name, and some people are just going to vote for a Democrat or Republican, and we've seen the independents in the middle squeeze smaller and smaller and smaller as time has gone on.
Independents squeezing smaller. That's an interesting assessment. You've seen that downstate. You think people are polarized to their partisan corners?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I think that President Trump had a lot to do with that, because he's polarizing on one and popular on it.
President Biden promised he would heal those divisions. Yeah. How has he done on that front?
Well, I think he's tried, but it's very difficult when the fight continues to be so partisan in the U.S. Congress.
Some of our viewers watching the record may come here for interesting politics or the bitter debate of it all. Sometimes there's some minutia on the economic side, or the business end of politics, if you will. So maybe a little less exciting, but very important, because it could lead to future tax hikes or jobless benefits being slashed, depending on how this next negotiation goes in Springfield. You've been close to the negotiations on Illinois having to figure out some big math problem about how it's going to resolve the unemployment insurance trust fund. A massive deficit, I think the largest record deficit the state has ever seen after the pandemic.
Yes, it was $4.7 billion. So the federal government regulates the unemployment insurance trust funds in every state. And as a result of the pandemic, Illinois had to borrow money from the federal government to the tune of $4.7 billion in order to keep paying unemployment benefits to unemployed workers. It was a historic amount of money that was needed during the pandemic, because many people were simply laid off and couldn't go to work. So we went about beginning to make some dents into that by last spring. We put an infusion of $2.7 billion into the trust fund. We added another $400 million into the trust fund, and now we're faced with an additional $1.3 billion.
That's the last remaining amount.
That's the last remaining amount. So the way we do it in Illinois, I think it's different than many other states. I think we do it correctly. We have what's called the agreed bill process, and I represent the House Democrats as part of that process. And what that is business interests as well as labor interests sit at a table, and we try to come to an agreement as to how we're going to solve this problem. We've been in negotiations in every caucus. The House Republicans, the House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats are all at the table, the governor's office, as well as leaders in business and labor.
And just to put a finer point on that, do I understand correctly, the reason business is there is because they want to manage how much higher their unemployment insurance cost might go, and the reason labor is there is because they want to make sure, if in fact workers get laid off, their benefits aren't slashed too low?
Right. And there's really three ways to solve this problem. You either have to increase employer taxes, which we'd rather not do. You'd have to decrease benefits from laid off workers, which we'd rather not do. Or you could infuse either federal or state money into the system. We've done the third thing twice now, and we're trying to negotiate with business and labor to come up with an agreement how to do the remaining $1.36 billion and ensure that long-term there's a trust fund balance, that if we have a recession, we're going to be able to manage our way through that. And that's, I think, a very difficult discussion, but I'm pleased to tell you that we're very, very close, and I anticipate, if things go as I believe that they will, that we'll be passing something in a bipartisan manner next week.
All right. And some economists still holding out hope for a soft landing of the recession. Do you hope that you can tackle this issue in the last week of veto session when lawmakers come back and finally put it to bed once and for all?
I'm hoping we're going to tackle it next week in the last week of veto session, and I believe that there's a framework for us to move forward that way.
So you're this close to the goal line then. Can you offer any assurances that there will be no cuts to unemployment insurance benefits?
We're still working through the specifics, and I know that there's drafting going on. I have some calls again today. I'll have them throughout the weekend, and I'm very hopeful that we will not see benefit cuts.
All right. I want to go back to the political divisions real quickly before we let you go and get your take on this. There used to be such a thing as a pro-life Democrat, downstate especially. There was such a thing as a pro-gun control Republican, somebody who might, in the suburbs maybe. And the issue of abortion and the issue of guns, both of those things in Illinois especially have really been, I think, the polarization has been rather accentuated in those corners. You represent downstate, I think one of the most southernmost Democrats left on the map now. Do you believe, or do you feel that your voters believe that the Illinois legislature has gone too far to the left on the issue of abortion? For example, the issue of parental notification?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that.
You don't believe?
I don't believe that we as Democrats in the Illinois House or Democrats nationally have gone too far on this issue. I think the opposite is true, that the Supreme Court and the Republicans have gone too far the other way. And I think this election bears that out. There also used to be pro-choice Republicans in the suburbs that we see
A rare or dying breed.
Yes, we don't really see exist anymore.
I shouldn't say dying. Their thoughts.
Yeah. Well,
have changed.
what's happening is, I think that people who have different views that aren't kind of to the right have a very difficult time of getting through primaries, and so they're getting beat in primaries, and then you have more conservative people who are on the Republican side of the ballot, and I think that reflects why we went from 73 Democratic votes in the Illinois House to 70, likely 78. A lot of the gains were in the suburbs.
In the suburbs. So when those, Republicans ran saying Democrats went too far to the left on this issue and they lost. It sounds like you're pointing to the scoreboard.
That's all you can really do after elections, right?
All right. Any other predictions about what the legislature might take up in this last week of veto session? For example, are there any specific changes you'd like to see made to the Safety Act?
I do believe that we will be making changes to the Safety Act. As you know, that legislation was passed nearly 2 years ago. There was a reason that there was a 2-year period left in order to, between the passage and the implementation, in order to make changes that might need to be made. I know that all stakeholders, when I say that, I mean people who represent law enforcement, prosecutors, as well as defend individuals, are all meeting right now, and they're trying to come up with a way that this is going to be workable. I think that we have an obligation to do that, so I do believe that there will be changes.
All right, Representative Jay Hoffman, thanks for joining us. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mark. You too, and your family.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you.